Marco had never imagined crossing an ocean, let alone standing under the bright lights of America's Got Talent. At 15, he had lived most of his life in a tiny Filipino village where people knew him as the boy who sang on street corners with an old, cracked guitar. He wasn't chasing fame, he was simply trying to help his mother earn enough money for food and school fees. That small act, his soft voice echoing through narrow streets, was all he knew of performing. But everything changed the day a tourist filmed him singing and uploaded the video online. The clip spread like wildfire, reaching millions, eventually catching the attention of AGT scouts who couldn't ignore the raw power in that small boy's voice. When they contacted him, Marco didn't believe it at first. He thought it was a joke. But when the official papers arrived, reality crashed into him like a wave. His mother hugged him tightly and whispered, "This is God opening a door for you." The moment Marco reached the United States, everything felt unreal. The buildings, the crowds, the food, everything was bigger, louder, faster. He had only one pair of shoes, worn and frayed, his favorite shirt washed thin from years of use. But when he stepped backstage at AGT, surrounded by confident performers with professional outfits and vocal coaches, he didn't feel ashamed. He felt ready. He reminded himself why he was there. Not for fame, not for attention, but for his family. When his name was called, his heart thumped in his chest like a drum. The stage stretched before him, brighter than any sunrise he had ever seen. Simon Cowell looked at him with curiosity, and Marco gripped the microphone with both hands to keep them from shaking. Simon asked gently, "Why are you here today?" Marco swallowed hard and answered softly, "To help my family, sir. And to share the gift God gave me." His words touched the audience, but no one expected what came next. The music started, and for a moment, Marco forgot how to breathe. But as the first lyric left his lips, something changed. His shaky voice grew strong, pure, and emotional. The entire audience leaned forward, stunned by the contrast between the shy boy on stage and the powerful voice emerging from him. Marco closed his eyes, singing not to impress, but to release the stories and struggles he carried. His voice soared higher, richer with feeling. When he reached the climax, people erupted into applause even before he finished. And when the final note faded, the crowd rose to their feet. All four judges stood, clapping for him. Simon shook his head in disbelief and said, "You're the definition of magic." Tears streamed down Marco's face as he bowed, overwhelmed by gratitude. He walked off stage knowing nothing in his life would ever be the same. After his breathtaking audition, Marco stepped into the next round carrying the same old shoes and the same humble spirit. But something in him had changed. He felt taller, stronger, like a small flame inside him had finally been lit. Back home, his mother had only one message for him: "Anik, just sing from your heart. That is enough." Those words echoed in his mind as he prepared backstage. Performers around him were warming up with vocal teachers, stylists adjusting their outfits, cameras capturing dramatic moments. Marco didn't have any of that. He practiced alone, eyes closed, humming softly, grounding himself in the memories of home. For this round, he chose a song that reminded him of quiet Filipino nights, when the electricity flickered out and his family gathered in candlelight, listening to radio music. It was during those nights that he learned to appreciate simplicity, togetherness, and music that soothed the heart. He wanted to bring that feeling to the AGT stage. When it was his turn, he walked out with a nervous smile. The judges greeted him warmly, already impressed by his journey. As the lights dimmed, Marco inhaled deeply. The melody began, slow and nostalgic, and he let his soul lead him. His voice came out tender, almost fragile at first, like he was whispering memories into the microphone. The audience fell silent, captured by the sincerity in his tone. Halfway through the performance, his voice cracked, not from fear, but from genuine emotion. It only strengthened the connection between him and everyone listening. He poured everything he had into the song, every struggle, every prayer, every dream. People in the audience wiped their tears. When he finished, the applause rose like a wave swelling through the theater. Sophia said he had the soul of someone far older, and Heidi told him he had a world-changing voice. Backstage, he was surprised to find himself trending online again. Fans called him the Filipino Angel, and for the first time, Marco felt not just accepted but celebrated. He dared to hope for even more. As the competition grew tougher, Marco felt the weight of expectations heavier on his shoulders. He was no longer the unknown boy from a small Filipino village, he was now one of the season's emotional favorites, and the world was watching. But as he looked around backstage at the other contestants, he couldn't help but notice the difference. They had stylists fixing their hair, coaches warming up their voices, and assistants rushing around with wardrobe options. Meanwhile, Marco sat quietly on a small folding chair, rehearsing with nothing but his old headphones and a cheap karaoke track. He didn't have the fancy resources they did, but he did have faith that his voice, his heart, and his story were enough. Minutes before his performance, he felt a familiar wave of fear wash over him. The stage seemed bigger tonight, the lights brighter, the pressure heavier. He knew that one wrong note or one shaky moment could send him home. He closed his eyes, clasped his hands, and whispered, "Lord, be with me. I can't do this alone." The prayer steadied him. It reminded him of long nights singing outside stores back home, performing for strangers who dropped coins into a small metal cup. It reminded him of his mother's sacrifices and the dreams his family carried for him. For this round, he chose a song that contestants usually avoided, something notoriously difficult, filled with big notes and emotional depth. He chose it because he wanted to prove something to himself. He wanted to show that even a boy with nothing could attempt something bold. When he stepped onto the stage, the room darkened and the first soft notes of the orchestra filled the air. He took one breath and stepped into the light. As soon as he began singing, everything else disappeared. His voice came out strong, controlled, and richer than anyone expected. He didn't rush or crack, he moved through every lyric with confidence he didn't even know he had. The audience watched in stunned silence as the small boy with the trembling hands transformed into an artist with remarkable power. Halfway through the performance, the camera caught Simon raising his eyebrows, impressed by the song choice and by Marco's control. Heidi leaned forward, amazed. The entire theater felt the emotion behind his voice as he held the long, soaring notes with unexpected strength. When he hit the final high note, the lights burst bright, and the audience erupted into applause. There was a moment of stillness before the judges spoke, as if the entire room needed to exhale. Then Simon said, "Marco, that was your best performance yet." The audience cheered, agreeing wholeheartedly. Sophia added that he had bravery unmatched by any contestant that night. Marco felt overwhelming relief. He bowed quickly, a shy smile spreading across his face as he walked off stage. Backstage, the host hugged him tightly, telling him he had just entered the heart of the competition. Marco didn't know how far he would go, but he felt a new strength. He was no longer singing just to survive, he was singing to inspire. By the time the semifinals arrived, AGT producers wanted to tell Marco's story more deeply. They visited his small Filipino village, capturing moments of everyday life, his mother stirring pots over a small stove, his siblings sharing a single electric fan, neighbors watching his performances on a tiny television that flickered whenever the power dipped. These scenes were emotional, real, and completely unfiltered. When AGT aired the footage before his performance, the entire audience grew quiet. People didn't just see Marco as a contestant anymore, they saw him as a reminder that talent can rise from the humblest places. As the video ended, the stage lit up in warm golden tones, almost like a sunrise. It reminded Marco of the early mornings back home, when he would wake before school to help his mother prepare food to sell. He walked to the center of the stage, holding the microphone with both hands, and waited as the music began. The song he chose was a powerful ballad about hope, resilience, and believing in better days, something he felt deeply connected to. His first note was soft but sure. His voice carried a tenderness that made people lean closer, wanting more. As the song built, Marco let emotion flow freely. Every lyric felt like a page from his life, the struggles, the prayers, the quiet moments when he doubted himself but kept going anyway. The judges watched with visible emotion. Sophia placed her hand over her heart. Heidi whispered, "Wow," under her breath. Even Simon, usually stoic, softened as he listened. As the music swelled, Marco lifted his voice to match it, reaching new heights he hadn't dared attempt before. His voice filled the theater, steady and soaring. It was as if the boy who once sang barefoot in the streets had grown into a young artist right before everyone's eyes. When he hit the climax of the song, the crowd erupted into cheers mid-performance, unable to contain their admiration. But Marco didn't break. He finished the song with a gentle, emotional ending that brought tears to many eyes. When the final note faded, the audience immediately rose to their feet, applauding loudly. The judges stood too, giving him another standing ovation. Simon spoke first. "Marco, you're not just singing. You're telling your story, and people feel it." The crowd cheered as he continued, "This might be one of the most meaningful performances we've had this season." Sophia told him that he had touched hearts around the world. Heidi said his voice carried truth, something rare and powerful. Backstage, Marco watched as his phone filled with notifications. Filipinos from every part of the world were sending messages of pride. Some called him a symbol of courage, others said he reminded them of home, and many said his performance made them cry. For Marco, it wasn't about being famous, it was about making people feel seen, heard, and hopeful. And that night, he realized he was doing exactly that. The night before the finals, Marco barely slept. He lay awake in his small hotel bed, staring at the ceiling as memories moved through his mind like scenes from a movie. He thought of the nights he stood under streetlights, singing for a few coins, hoping the sound of his voice would drown out the rumbling in his stomach. He remembered skipping meals so his younger siblings could eat, remembered the monsoons that flooded their small home and how music was the only thing that made the darkness feel a little less scary. These memories didn't weaken him, they fueled him. They reminded him why he was here. The finals were a different world. Cameras, producers, dancers, musicians, nerves humming in the air. Everyone around him seemed polished, prepared, and confident. But Marco carried something they didn't have, a life shaped by struggle, resilience, and a heart filled with hope. For his final performance, he made the bold decision to sing an original song, something he co-wrote with the show's band. It was a tribute to dreamers everywhere, especially those who came from nothing but dared to hope for everything. Backstage, he held the microphone close to his chest, whispering a quiet prayer. "Lord,